They try to hide us. They put banks up round the sites, high fences round us. They're excluding us from society, not including us. We're the forgotten people.
This gypsy and traveller site is one of hundreds across the UK. It's wedged next to a recycling plant and a fire brigade training school that sometimes smothers it in smoke. But for the people who live here, the site is crucial to their identity.
Bricks and mortar is no good to a traveller. When we're living in houses, we're locked in like we're in a bird in a cage.
But gypsies and travellers face another constraint: financial exclusion. An address here can make it extraordinarily difficult to get home insurance, car insurance, or even a bank account. And that means some of the most marginalised people in Britain face higher risks and higher costs, and have less chance of living a stable, prosperous life. In this film, we're going to look at how gypsies and travellers are fighting to overcome these issues, and what the problem reveals about our financial institutions and our society.
The next plot up after this one, that's my sister-in-law. So it's basically, we got a lot of family on it. And it's a beautiful thing to have family around you.
Terry Green is one of tens or maybe hundreds of thousands of people in England who call themselves gypsies or travellers. He spent 28 years trying to move out of his council house to somewhere like this site near Maresfield in East Sussex.
We used to live in a lay-by there before that site was built. For 3 years we lived in that lay-by. And then we moved back off and I went travelling. And then we came back to this site again, and then the council came and told us that we couldn't live together as a family unit, and they give us an ultimatum that I get off or both of us get off. And they moved us off of there, they gave us an house, and for 28 years I was trying to get out of that house. I just didn't want to live there at all.
Yet, after Green won his battle to find a pitch on a caravan site, he found himself embroiled in a new struggle. Green's motor insurance provider cancelled his cover as soon as he switched his address to a gypsy site.
I phoned 54 insurance companies and they turned me down flat because when they said, "Where do you live?" the address, when I said a caravan site, no. And that's all I had 54 times. We can't get insurance on our caravans. We can't get home contents insurance. We can't get nothing. They sent a letter saying, "We cancelled your insurance because you didn't tell us the truth, where you lived." I said, "But I told you it was a caravan site, but you didn't tell us it was a gypsy site."
This kind of discrimination makes it difficult to live and work.
Thing is, when you're a travelling man, you know, you're brought up not to just do one thing. You've got to learn more than one job. So you could be doing roofing, tree work, bricking, tarmacking. You know, you've got to learn, put your hands around everything. You know, it's not just one thing in life, because every day everything's getting harder. Unless you've got a solid performance job, that's it. And
that's why we basically want the kids to get a good education, because our way of life is diminishing.
20 years ago, similar problem, very hard for housing association tenants to get contents insurance for their homes. They were routinely being told, we don't provide. The difference being there were 4 million of them. So eventually the insurers thought there's a market here, we should devise a specialist product, and some of the smaller groups went into that market, and it's now quite successfully served. The problem for gypsy travellers is that as a group, they're not as large, and also they're very marginalised in society. I would love it for a fintech company to come along and champion their rights and say, yes, these people are just as entitled to access financial products and insurance as anyone else, and the way that they live their lives shouldn't be a factor in that.
Accounts like Green's are very familiar to Emma Nuttall of Friends, Families and Travellers, a group that works against discrimination.
Really, on every indices, Gypsy and travellers face severe social exclusion. Gypsy and travellers have the highest infant mortality rates, the lowest life expectancy, the lowest educational attainment out of any groups in the UK. And financial exclusion is another area that, yes, Gypsy and travellers do face. A lot of our clients are homeless, nomadic gypsies and travellers, because of the shortage of authorised sites to stop on. So they don't have a fixed address, they're statutory homeless, and it does present difficulties getting bank accounts. A client of ours went into an insurance broker on the high street to get insurance for the caravan that she lived in, and she had illiteracy issues. So the insurance broker filled out the form for her, and there was a question on the form which said, do you live on a gypsy site? Well, the broker didn't realise that she was a traveller and never asked the question. I mean, that is an illegal, discriminatory question, but so the client didn't know that the question was even on the form. And later down the line, she had a burglary and she went to the insurance company to pay out and they refused her. And we did actually refer the case to the financial ombudsman, and she won the case and she got paid.
In general, financial inclusion is a policy area where there's actually a great deal of political consensus. It's a good thing, and there's a great deal of appetite to do more of it. You know, for sort of fairly obvious reasons, right? On the Labour side, they see it as an issue of, you know, social justice, equality of opportunity. On the Conservative side, they feel that, you know, people, you know, getting that first step on the financial ladder is an important part of people becoming Conservative. The thing that UK politics struggles to process when they're thinking about how to help people from a, you know, gypsy roamer or traveller background is that we have this sort of, in some ways, quite liberal approach of, look, if you have a, you know, whatever you want to do once you've closed the door of your house, fine, right? Provided that you buy into the central British thing of having your house with a door that you close behind it. And something, I think, about the nomadic lifestyle sort of breaks that British assumption about what liberal integration looks like. And I think that's not just in finance, but in general, one of the reasons why people from a gypsy roamer traveller background are so poorly served in the UK.
The problems affect groups that have long been among the most marginalised in society in Britain and Europe more generally for centuries. In mainland Europe, the persecution reached its nadir in the Nazis' killing of hundreds of thousands of Roma, as they're often called in Europe, during the Holocaust. Brian Belton, an academic and writer of Romani gypsy descent, tries to unpick what he says is a very complex picture of labels and identity among gypsies and travellers in the UK and Ireland. Gypsies, whose name is short for Egyptian but whose origin is uncertain, first appeared in the historical record around 1500, Belton says. Irish travellers are a more recent addition. Some families arrived as recently as the 1970s to build motorways and ended up travelling because of the challenges of finding housing.
They came along, first of all, with the building of the canals, probably before that, but also the East London docks were basically built by Irish Labour. Then there was the railways and the roads. So these waves of Irish immigration into this country brought with them what you would call a traveller population. And some of them became travellers because of the access to housing. You know, in the 60s and 70s was pretty terrible.
But, Belton goes on, some discrimination takes the form of generalised prejudice against anyone who lives in a caravan. There was particular suffering during the coronavirus pandemic, he says.
When the pandemic came around, the site owners, not all of them, but appreciable numbers of them, started to enforce the holiday rent rules and were throwing these people off the sites for 3 months. So you have to do something within the, you know, the bylaws, so you can't be there for 3 months of the year. You see, so they're a group of people that are given a problem because of the way they've not necessarily chosen to live. Some of them have, but some of them they've been obliged to live in this way.
There are separate stereotypes and prejudices, according to Belton, concerning gypsies as an ethnic group. Gypsies are expected to be attracted to work laying tarmac, the black stuff, and to be naturally gifted boxers. Belton is proud of his gypsy heritage. But he doesn't see any reason why he should desert his comfortable terraced house for a caravan.
I get called a traitor because I don't live in a caravan, that I should have, it's my blood to be nomadic. And my argument is, well, there's other ways to be nomadic than be around the country. I'm a gypsy with a library. I'm a gypsy with a PhD. I'm a gypsy who went to university. You know, now that doesn't get associated. I don't fit the nice raggle-taggle gypsy mode, you know. And that's the same sort of myth. It's a similar sort of myth that I've got to live in a caravan. Most gypsies in Europe do not live in caravans.
The bottom line, he says, is that gypsies, travellers and anyone living a nomadic life are treated as outsiders.
Britain is still a colonial society. So what we do is we portray people as them and us. They become the pariahs. They become the ones who are to blame, that lower group. It's happened in other societies with other groups of people. It's a kind of caste system in a way. And then we bring that as gypsies, saying, yes, that's correct, we're not like you.
But even playing a bit more by mainstream society's rules doesn't necessarily resolve all the financial issues facing gypsies and travellers.
Most of the people on here are gypsies, but there's a few travellers on as well.
At the site where he lives on the edge of Darlington in northeast England, Billy Welsh, one of the community's best-known figures, explains why so many gypsies end up self-employed.
The reason why we're all self-employed is because nobody will employ us. One of my sons have just finished college, totally out of the norm, and he went and he passed with flying colours, and then he had to do a year's work experience. And so he had to be employed by a qualified plumber or a company, and for a year or two, so he got work experience, like being an apprentice. And he couldn't nobody would employ him. Absolutely nobody at all would employ him.
He says tensions between gypsies and settled communities, including problems over the setting up of caravan sites, often stem from mutual misunderstanding. Unusually, at the site in Darlington, the local council doesn't run the facility directly, but has contracted the work out to Welsh. He says such arrangements have an important role to play in improving the lot of gypsy and traveller communities.
Sometimes people from the settled community can misunderstand us, or vice versa, we can misunderstand them, do you know what I mean? And it sometimes can cause friction. But Darlington County Council understand that. And they understand by working with the gypsies and travellers like myself and coordinating things and running things by me. They'll say, Billy, we've got this idea. And what do you think of this? I'll say, yeah, it's a good idea, but don't do it maybe in that direction. Do it this way. Tweak it a little bit and do it, and it'll work better. Do you know what I mean? Brilliant. By working with the gypsies and travellers, it's worked well.
Yet the residents of sites elsewhere, like this one in Bow in East London, still believe they're being shut out of the system and feel a deep sense of injustice. Marion Mahoney, a traveller living here, can't understand why it's impossible for her to insure the contents of the chalet and fixed caravan she inhabits here.
They don't find a caravan or a static home as safe as what they would bricks and mortar. And some people do find it very difficult to get their home insurance. Is it even insurance like for your funeral? They find it very bad. A lot of travellers just don't bother with funeral plans and things like that. Because even then, the funeral directors will say to you, well, you might move away. You know, they should give them an ultimatum if they do move away, that they'll always be there for them if they want to do that, you know. Almost anything in life that hire purchase, very, very hard to get hire purchase, and very, very hard to get like anything, a loan or anything like that, very, very hard.
The Association of British Insurers, the industry's trade body, insists that its members don't discriminate on the basis of customers' ethnicity. They said, one of the elements insurers need to accurately assess risk when considering cover is a postcode, as this provides a range of information about the area, from flood risk to the volume of road traffic accidents. There were products available for people who couldn't provide a postcode, they went on. We'd encourage anyone looking for such cover to contact an insurance broker who may be able to help, they said. Insurers will always abide by the Equality Act, they added.
On a data level, any insurer has to price risk. Now, if there's no data available on the risk of insuring people in a particular area or on a gypsy traveller site, one insurer pulls out of the market, another does, that data's getting thinner and thinner. So you can see why it's convenient for them to say, well, we can't price this risk, therefore we can't provide cover to this group who could be high risk, and maybe it's not a market that they feel they need to be in. I would throw down the gauntlet to the insurance industry and say, you've seen the film, show us that you're not discriminating against this group of people. All of the piecemeal excuses that you've given for not providing cover for certain postcodes, saying that there's a data blackout, you can't price the risk. Invent a product, team up with a fintech, look at the innovation that's going on in the market elsewhere. Nothing is impossible. Show that this is a problem that you care about solving rather than just turning customers away.
There is very little sort of thought and policy attention given outside the community itself to how you might facilitate better access to, finance, to schools, to what have you, while still facilitating people's willingness to live as they wish. When as a government you want insurance companies, or indeed any financial service company, to do something that they do not want to do because they think it is financially risky, that is where you should use your capacity as the lender of last resort to incentivise and change the calculation. That it's much better to create the conditions where an insurance company feels relaxed and comfortable with providing insurance to people from a gypsy, Roma or traveller background than it is to have a situation in which the government goes, well, we don't care if you're comfortable with doing it, we're going to force you into doing it anyway.
Warren Lee, a support worker for London gypsies and travellers, says there ought to be tighter regulation of the financial services industry to alleviate the problems.
Yes, there needs to be regulation, but also there needs to be, legislation or internal pressure as well from within these organisations, from people within these organisations to say this isn't right what we're doing. There's a family living in Greenwich that have no insurance on their entire home or any of their cars, and we're not going to give it to them. And neither will the next company or neither will the next company. So there needs to be something coming from within that sector to put a check on it. There's only so much that regulation, auditing and stuff can find. Really, we need the people that work within the financial sector to say, not on my watch.
One of the few recent victories for gypsies and travellers was a result of whistleblowing, Lee points out. A worker at Pontins, an operator of holiday camps, told the media that the company used a list of names associated with the traveller community as the basis for refusing some bookings. But people at the site in Bow see the challenges of getting insurance as part of a wider pattern, that everything is made a bit more complicated and a bit more expensive for gypsies and travellers. Frances Jones, one of Marion's neighbours, says her family had little difficulty getting traders' insurance for the vehicles used in her partner's scrap metal business until they changed their address from a normal house to the Bow traveller site.
I went to renew it, and that's when I got told, sorry, we can't do your insurance. The insurance goes up like literally £1,000 a year when they realise you live in a caravan site, so you won't afford it to pay for it. I face a lot because we're trying to work proper, legalise ourselves, and when we're trying to legalise ourselves, we get bounced off. Like, what? It feels like you're downgraded you because you're trying to be legal. If you try and put yourself on insurance for driving a motor with scrap, you have to have a scrap licence. You have to go through the government to get that. Then you have to go through the government and prove that you're doing this. Then automatically you have to tax register yourself. That's to just get insurance.
Her biggest worry, though, is for the next generation.
They won't be able to get married, they won't be able to get married, they won't get an extra pitch, they won't get insurance on their car. But when they come to 17 or 18 past the driving test, what a travelling girl and boy does, they get in the car, they can't get in the car. They've got a car sitting there and a driving licence, can't get no insurance. So they're stuck and they're... it's a very hard situation, I've been through it.
This issue of financial exclusion, it's not something that the government should take its eye off, especially in the cost of living crisis. People who are on low incomes are digitally excluded as well as financially excluded, and this is becoming more and more of a problem as our lives move online. You need to have money to have a laptop, a smartphone, a broadband connection, phone credit. The benefit system is digital first, yet this really isn't being recognised enough in the corridors of power. And for the poorest, financial literacy, knowing about the choices that you have with your money is certainly a big part of the issue, but not having enough money is probably a bigger problem.
There is little dispute that the UK's gypsies and travellers face a hard time obtaining a whole range of financial services. They have unusual difficulty getting cars insured. They seldom have cover for their home contents. Simple products to spread the costs of purchases are often out of reach. The community is organising to curb abuses, but the financial services industry continues to insist there's no fundamental problem, and that they can't help it if gypsies and travellers are a poor financial risk. That has left people like Marion Mahoney and Francis Jones worried. They fear that any improvements for the next generation may be far more incremental than the scale of the problem demands.